What I always say with networking is it's not checking a box, right? It's checking a pulse. So the person that you're connecting with, like find out about that person. And even if you're introverted and you feel like you may not be, very extrovert and have all the energy, but you can still ask those questions, right? Like ask them, what did they want to be when they were a younger girl? When was the last time you did something for the first time? Like have these conversations. But here's the next step. You have to remember that, right? So then that's where I say utilize a CRM or a tool to document that and just build on those relationships.
Welcome back to the Bombshell Business Podcast. I'm your host, Amber Hurdle, and I have a special treat today because I have one of my in real life friends on the show and really talking about something that I committed an entire chapter to in the Bombshell Businesswoman, How to Become a Bold, Brave Female Entrepreneur, because it is such an important piece of doing business, especially for women, because we are relational and we connect and we're of service to each other and we look for those opportunities. So I'm so stinking excited to have Shannen Stewart, the president and founder of Heels and Handshakes, on the show. And we're going to talk about networking, but not just like the part where you find people and, you go to events and all that kind of stuff. It's really the hard part, which is maintaining those relationships and making them strategic, mutually beneficial, and all that good stuff. So before we get into the interview, let me read Shannen's very impressive bio. Shannen Stewart is the founder of Heels and Handshakes, an organization that fosters community through in-person events and digital experiences for entrepreneurs, women in business, and our allies. Shannen created Heels and Handshakes in 2013 when she noticed the lack of opportunities to network among the women of the greater Nashville area and wanted to create collaborative interactions for them to experience. What started, listen here, bombshells, this stuff doesn't happen overnight. What started as a 10-person meeting for cocktails and conversation has evolved to over 3,000 women and men in the area. Since founding the organization, she has curated over 240 events for the Heels and Handshakes members and is now expanding to Texas. She has won multiple awards and has extensive, highly visible brands that she's partnered with. And today, she will share her secrets to help you become a more effective networker. Welcome to the Bombshell Business Podcast, Shannen.
Yay! Thank you for having me, Amber. I'm so excited to be on here.
Me too. I mean, I can't believe that it's taken this long for me to coordinate getting you on the show. I think we've always had concentric circles. I always knew who she was. And then there's always business awards season in Nashville. And we were running in those same crowds and we both won our categories for the Nashville NELA Awards. And that's when I was like, hi.
Great memory. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and then again, we're at the same events and everything. So it's nice to get to share your wisdom and 10 years of watching, that's your whole thing. So my first question, because if you're from Nashville, you're a listener in Nashville, we are I don't live there anymore. I keep saying we are. Y'all are a networking city.
Yeah.
And there are other women in business things, but something was really missing for you to say we need something different. What was that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, 10 years ago, I was working for a supplier and I was in business development. And so I had a very ambitious goal of meeting 25 clients a week. So some might say that networking was part of my job description when I worked for that corporation before I went out on my own. And there were lots of opportunities to go to events where you can meet people. But I found that there was something missing for women specifically in hospitality. And that's really how Heels and Handshakes started. It was only for women in hospitality. And then, 10 years later, we've expanded to all women in business. But I really found that I disrupted the industry by making it for women only and having raw, real conversations. I would go to events and you would hear from speakers that would be like, look at me, look at me. And I'm like, no, learn from me. I want practical, tactical takeaways. And then another element that I felt like was missing was the mental health. Ooh. So part of Heels and Handshakes, all members get 1 month free of therapy because I might come on a little too strong, Amber, where I'm like, who's your therapist? But I want to normalize it. I want it to be like when people are like, who's your hair girl? Who's your nail girl? I want it to be like, who's your therapist? And so those were the two main things that I thought were missing. And I was like, we've got to change this.
I love that so much. And I'm so honest about my own mental health on this show because I'm like you, it needs to be normalized.
Absolutely.
Women often get overlooked. You know, the boys are bouncing off the walls. And so they're like, that kid has ADHD. But then like top performing students like me who medically have ADD.
Yeah.
I didn't get that diagnosis until much longer, and so much shame and second guessing yourself, imposter syndrome, all that comes when you don't understand like just how your brain operates. So I love that everything you just said, because I was part of the Nashville community for 30 years, it's like, yes, it's like, I'm Amber and my life is perfect and here's everything you should know about me. I'm killing it. You foster an environment where people can come and be real.
Absolutely. And it's like we go a step further. We're like in our emails before our monthly meetings go out, we call it our know before you go. We even give icebreakers because sometimes, especially coming back after the holidays, it's like, so how was your holiday? And like all the small talk, like we give icebreakers where it's like, here's, in-depth conversations. Like you don't have to go full Brene Brown over here, but like we give the tools of like, ask these questions and it's okay to not be okay. And I'm tired of hearing like, oh, I'm so busy. And so we definitely we want authentic, and just like your listeners, Amber, like we attract high achieving women. And so that's another big part of the mental health. It's like have that resource, have somebody to talk to and, work through that. So.
Yeah. Well, when I think about some of the women that are like my close friends who are in your community, I'm like, those are the baddest bees on the planet. I mean, they are so amazing, high performing. And then also people that I know like will hold me down.
Yeah.
You attract that. And so I think it's like light attracts light. And I think that's something important to remember when you do go into a room. If you walk in slumped and everything, you're not playing up, like play up to the room that you're going into. And Shannen's rooms are high wattage.
Love that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well-deserved compliments. So the easy part to me, and I have a worksheet and it's in the Bombshell Businesswoman, is like finding the places, right? So like I know like I'm going to 2 different networking events this month because I'm trying to build community where I now live in the Sarasota County area in Florida. That's the easy part. But if I'm not a natural connector, if I'm introverted, how do you maintain that relationship where it builds and grows and then becomes that mutually beneficial experience from a business perspective?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And so, what I always say with networking is it's not checking a box, right? It's checking a pulse. So the person that you're connecting with, like find out about that person. And even if you're introverted and you feel like you may not be, very extrovert and have all the energy, but you can still ask those questions, right? Like ask them, what did they want to be when they were a younger girl? When was the last time you did something for the first time? Like have these conversations. But here's the next step. You have to remember that, right? So then that's where I say utilize a CRM or a tool to document that and just build on those relationships. So, like let's say if you're an introvert and you love reading books and I meet you at the Sarasota Chamber event and we're talking and you love books. A way that I would be able to maintain that relationship is I would be like, oh, hey, Amber, do you want to join my book club? Or, oh, I just saw this book. This made me think of you, right? Like it's an excuse to reach out. But then it also shows that I was listening to you where you said, hey, I have a goal to read 40 books this year. And then I'm sending you recommendations. Like it's just building on that relationship.
Yeah. And how important is it for us to feel seen?
Yes.
You go to some networking events and it's like, and I do a lot of networking in the mergers and acquisition space. So you get like these MBAers that are in private equity and, it's like, and not all of them. Listen, if you're listening and you're in those circles with me, I'm not talking about you because you would not be listening to this podcast, but those other people, those other people, it's just like, and I'm like, okay, but if I feel like you see me,
yes.
And I feel like you understand me and you want to champion me and you can see where I can add value to you. Now it's worth giving a crap what your dog's name is.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because if you don't care about me, I'm not interested in adding you to an already full plate.
Exactly. And people can also spot out the opportunist in the room too, right? Where it's like, or the narcissists that are only really just talking to really talk and promote themselves.
Yeah. Thank you. Amen. Yes. Okay. So when we've gone to the networking events. We're smart enough to get there. And then we were smart enough to find the right people in the room. Now we're smart enough to have like a CRM. And let me ask a question on that, because I was struggling with this because I have my CRM for like sales.
Yep.
And then I have like, the networking side of things. Do you mix those and just keep them separate? Or do you have a separate CRM for your networking than from like if you're a salesperson or a business build owner?
So I love my CRM that I utilize. It's called Cove. So it's COVBE. And I can utilize that for both. So tracking sales, but then also relationship building. And what I love the most about Cove is that it sets reminders, right? So like reach out to this person in a week or 2 weeks. And then I have a notes section. And my notes will be like, dog's name is, like everything. So it helps me because look, let's be real. I couldn't even tell you what I ate for dinner 2 days ago. How am I going to remember our conversation that we had 6 months ago? So I'm all about working smarter, not harder. And so I utilize that CRM tool for both sales, but then also relationship building. And then anytime I see things, right? So like, let's say, if you had just moved to Florida, even though you've been there for a while, and I knew there was a tornado or a hurricane coming, I'm going to make a note to check in on you, just little personal details like that.
I love that. And I know Shannen, so I know it's all coming from a place of authenticity because she wouldn't mess with you if you weren't.
No.
She's got too many things going on. She's got her own dog, her own son, her own husband, her own 3,000 people to keep happy. So I love that. So Cove, we'll put that in the show notes, the link to it as well.
Yeah.
And then another thing that, this is new to the show because I don't typically talk about products or anything, but just you were talking about remembering and, being proactive and not procrastinating is all part of networking. And so there is a product I've been using and I want to put this on screen because like, I know a lot of podcasters were like, oh, I use this and they want to make a commission or whatever. And that's not what I'm after here. This is my recent box of Magic Mind. You can see that I actually do take it. This was from this morning. So I want to share this with you. And yes, I have ADD and this helps with that. It helps with focus. It helps with my anxiety. It slows me down. It's kind of like this flow state that you're in where everything just goes because of all the adaptogens and all the stuff. But there's a product or an ingredient called matcha. And I want to talk about that because matcha is very powerful. Another thing that gets in my way, and y'all know I talk very freely about my mental health and about my body, and I'm very much about your nervous system. We cannot show up at our best at a networking event if our nervous system is shutting down. I have 7 autoimmune disorders, 7. So I've had endometriosis, which is why I had a hysterectomy. I have arthritis in my hip. I have to have a hip replacement. I'm 44 years old, not trying to fall apart, but my body's just like, hey. So my constant thing is anti-inflammatory. My constant thing is how do I reduce inflammation in my body? And matcha actually does that because it decreases oxidative stress. So when there's an imbalance between your free radicals and your antioxidants, that's when inflammation occurs. So not to give a science lesson, but y'all know I'm a science nerd. So I want to know, what is this doing in my body? Taking this helps with that as well and empowers you to show up at your best so that your light shines when you do go in a room like this. So if you want to give it a whirl, you just have to go to magicbind.com/bombshell. You can use the code bombshell20 and then you will get 20% off if you do a one-time purchase to get just like a box. And you can actually get 56% off if you go into a subscription like I have. So I get this cheap. You can get it cheap too. And then no stimulants. No stimulants. Back away from the Advil and move on. So thank you, Shannen, for your patience as I talk about this new important thing for our listeners. Let's get back to networking.
No, I got excited. I'm like, add to cart,
Yeah, exactly. I know. And I'm serious. Like, this stuff really works. I would not waste your time or put this in your ear if I didn't feel like, okay, this is something that the majority of my women have inflammatory issues. They have ADD. They're on the spectrum. Neurodivergent people come to me. That's part of our makeup. Not everybody is, but a lot. So, okay. So now we're at this event. We are using Cove. We're staying in touch with people.
Yeah.
How do we prepare? So I know I have my little processes that I do before I go to a conference or a chamber event or like an open house. What do you do before you go to an event to make sure you're optimizing your time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really big on, I want to know who's in the room. So I am type A planner.
No.
You're like, oh, really? Who, me? And so, my advice, whether, let's just use a conference, for example, I'm always quick on social media. So, I'm utilizing LinkedIn and I'm saying, hey, who's going? So, I'm starting conversations. And I know also the host will appreciate that, right? Because they're getting content.
Yeah.
So, whether it's on LinkedIn, Instagram, I start creating buzz. And as much as I hate being on video, like, I am a behind the scenes girl, like hair in a ponytail, no makeup. Like that's me all day long. And you don't have to be on makeup to be on video and anything. I think just be authentic to yourself. But I encourage you, like, get on stories, show a video on LinkedIn, and tell people you're excited for this event, whether it's a conference or an open house. And then you're starting to get the conversation going. And then people are going to be excited to be like, oh, I'm going to that too. And so then you're learning about who's in the room and, just getting excited. And then you could even say, like, hey, meet me in the lobby and we can walk in together, just creating that community and getting the buzz going. Now, at our events, what we do, because just like your bombshell listeners, we're high achievers, I like to gamify it, Amber. So when
I love it.
Yeah, when people come to our meetings, we say 4 before you pour. You have to meet 4 new people before you go to the bar.
Nice.
Yeah. So we attract the achievers, the goal getters. So they're like, okay, 4. And it's so funny because the majority of the time people come back and be like, Shannen, I got 6 or I met 8 people, because they want to beat that, goal.
Don't give me a challenge.
Yeah. They're like, challenge accepted. But then it also helps just create, authentic, right? Like I said, don't just check a box to be like, oh, I met a person to go get a drink. The majority of the time they're meeting all these great people that maybe they might not have met. And they're like in these deep conversations. And sometimes they forget about the bar, right? They forget to get their drink ticket because they're really cultivating that rapport with that person.
Yeah. I'll tell you who is so good for everything that you just said, from promoting the event to covering the event in real time to staying in touch, but also just being very intentional. When I say her name, you're gonna be like, because you cannot walk into a room with this woman and then you're like, we've lost her. We're moving on to the next thing. She's got 30 people she's got to talk to, and we love her for it. But it's Kirby Miller.
I knew you were gonna say Kirby. I knew it. Yes, absolutely.
You can say Kirby Miller in Nashville, and everyone knows her, like everyone. And so she's Kirby and Co. on Instagram. So if you're like, okay, I don't really know how to do this, follow Kirby. Also follow Shannen, obviously. But Kirby's like not in charge and just attends these events, and she's so good at it. And we'll put a link to her episode. She was a very popular episode on the podcast. And because she went out of her comfort zone, we met. And then I think you got an award or you were recognized at something. I can't remember. It was some event at the Virgin Hotel downtown. And that's when I met Tiffany, and Kirby introduced us, and I had to go to another networking event just after it. And so I didn't know Tiffany Napper at the time.
She's amazing.
So amazing. Also former guest of the show. And I just met her and I was like, you need to come with me. And I literally put her in my car and drove her to this other event and got there. And I was like, I brought another person. I hope that's okay. I know this is invite only, but she's invited by me. And they're like, it's great. So that's the momentum of what it is that you do. So yeah, just love that.
No, okay. And I'll give you an example. So I love what you just did where you brought Tiffany and then you just talked about Kirby. So one thing I didn't even talk about, which was really disrupting the industry, our mantra. So I'm tired of people being mean girls, cliquish. I am unsubscribing to that narrative. It's right. 2024. We're not doing that. And so our mantra is surround yourself with women who would drop your name at a room full of opportunities. We really, really practice the mindset of abundance. And I love that you're like, oh, Tiffany, this is invite only. Girl, you're coming with me, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's and I feel like that's your readers, the bombshells. They want to do that too, or your listeners. It's surround yourself with women who would drop your name when you're not there and just, be like, oh, you got to meet her. She's incredible. And that's how we keep growing to over 3,000 is because we're attracting other like-minded women and just need that person to drop your name.
And just from a really personal perspective too, because of course I've referred business back and forth with these women that I've talked about. Then that same night, and I can't even remember what it was maybe a Nashville Lifestyle something, I met Kirby introduced me to Brittany Campbell, who founded Her Bank or was one of the founders of Her Bank. And we were kind of like, hey, nice to meet you, whatever. Well, then she asked me out on a girl date and we went and had cocktails together. And then those 3 women, as I was moving through the aftermath of my divorce and moving and literally the day that I got in my car and drove to Florida to move, those 3 women had brunch with me to send me off.
Oh,
And
I
to
love
say how
that.
important they are, all because of the choice to go network.
Yeah.
They still, I love them so much. I would do anything in the world for them. So when we're talking about networking, like I wanted to start because it's the Bombshell Business podcast. So, we want to like solve problems in exchange for money. That's why we're here. But the beauty of having like a girl gang, and I can't even start on my girl gang group text, but to have a girl gang of support through all the things, through dating, through marriage, through mothering, through business, through health, through crisis, through grief, through all that, you foster that. And so I don't want anyone to listen and say like, just make it really transactional. So when we're making these introductions, like Kirby did for me with like Brittany, well, okay, let me back up. So Kirby, she just knows all the things. She's like so spiritually in tune with an ant. Okay. But not everybody's that way. And sometimes it can be a burden when somebody says, oh, you need to connect with this person. And there's like no end game there. So how do you know who to introduce who to where it would delight them and not feel like a burden? Like I got to cram one more person in to satisfy you.
Yes. So I would like to just say and put this out there. Everyone on social media is like, what's in 2024 and what's out. What's in is before you make that introduction, ask that person first, especially if it's an email introduction, because I have many times been connected. And then I'm like, I am a people person. I love meeting people. Like Amber, you and me, if we left an Uber, I guarantee you we'd be invited to that Uber driver's wedding. Like that's just how we are, right? But I have to set boundaries and have, be very much like a ninja with my time. So when people are sending me emails and it's like the CC of meet so-and-so, and then I have no idea where this is going. So that's out. What's in 2024 is if you think it's going to be mutually beneficial for two people to connect, and it doesn't have to be transactional. It could be, hey, Sarah just moved here from Chicago. She's new. She doesn't know anybody. I know you're from Chicago. I think you guys would have a lot in common. Like that's a personal, right? It doesn't have to be transactional. Give the other person a heads up, because if you're just going into this email completely blind, but then also ask if they have the capacity, like, hey, because they may not have the bandwidth to take on a phone call or a meeting. So my advice would be before you do that introduction, because, we always want to drop name and room full of opportunities, check with the first person and see if they have the bandwidth and the capacity to make this connection, make this meeting, and then also tell them how it would be mutually beneficial. And so it's, how is this beneficial? What's the next step? And then are you going to connect them? So it's like, are you going to connect them in an email? I get text messages all the time. Group chat.
Do not give out my personal cell phone number. Bad list.
That's an out list. Yeah, bad list. Do not do that. But it's like, I just have to set the boundaries, right? Like it needs to be an email. I don't need Facebook. There's so many different, and I sound like an old lady now where like, there's so many platforms, but it's like LinkedIn message, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, text. And it's like, just keep it to an email, but check in with the person first.
Yeah. And I just have to say, like, my executive assistant, first of all, she's savage in the best way. She's so great.
Love it.
But if I can't easily ask her to coordinate it, like if you're trying to connect me on Instagram, like she doesn't have access to that. So now I have to copy and paste and get it and like just email. That's where we do business, is email. And I know that's harder for the younger generations, but
yeah, well, you got to get on it. And and this is the other thing. If it's a pain in the ask, it's going to be a pain during the task. So it's like, if it's too much to like connect and do all this, then you don't even want to make that connection. It's like, just make it easy, streamline it in an email.
Yeah, for sure. Shannen, I want to talk to you for the rest of the day and just go through all the different ways that women can, my whole success path has been my network. And I've said so many times that I feel like my life today, which I feel is amazing, is like a beautiful quilt that just covers my life and protects me and keeps me warm. And all the patches on the quilt are contributions from the various people who have invested in me over the years. And I can't take credit for my success. I just look at my quilt and I look at all the love that's been poured into me. So this is really, really important to me to encourage other bombshells to start approaching, who do I want to become? Where do I want to go? And who's going to go on that journey with me? So this has all been extremely helpful. But now it's time for the final question. What parting piece of advice, can be anything in the world, doesn't have to do with networking.
Yeah.
Can be, of course. what parting piece of advice would you give to a bombshell, a bold, brave, unwaveringly confident woman in business?
I mean, I could talk all day long. I learned a lot of lessons last year, right? Just like do this and do that. My main parting advice would be just take care of yourself and take breaks. I know that we all talk about like hustle culture is over, but as we mentioned, attracting high achievers, it's really easy to fall into that again of like just getting back. And so my main advice is just really take care of yourself. And if you don't make time, I think that quote is like, if you don't make time for your wellness, you'll have to make time for your illness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be vulnerable. I experienced that last year. I got sick in December and it was my body was shutting down. It's like, you can't go anymore. So for all your bombshells listening, I just really encourage you to prioritize yourself, take breaks, focus on being instead of always doing.
Oh, I just got goosies on my calves. Amen. I use the term nervous system all the time because when your nervous system is responding, that's your body screaming at you. So this is exactly what happened to Shannen and what she's advising you to do. So I love that. Now, I know that we can go to heelsandhandshakes.com. Not that I didn't know that, but I wanted to be double sure. You can also find Shannen on LinkedIn. She's Shannen, but it's Shannen Stewart, Stewart, not with a U. You can find her on Instagram. It's Heels and Handshakes, all one word. Yeah. And then if you want to email her, because now here's a couple things. I know she's in Nashville, but she's going into Texas. And if you're in a large market and you're like, I want this, then email membership@heelsandhandshakes.com. Anything else that I missed?
No, you covered it all. I mean, we're on all the social medias. Come hang out, drop a DM on Instagram. I'll reply. And then we are growing and expanding. So if you've listened to this episode and you're like, I need community, I want to be around other like-minded women who are authentic and real, but also prioritize mental health, send us an email and we can start exploring maybe coming to your city. So yeah.
I love it. Shannen, thank you so much for talking about limited time, girl. I know you're blowing and going like I do. So thank you for making sure that we had this time together and that you've invested in our bombshell audience. I super appreciate you.
Thank you, Amber. I'm so honored to be on your episode and to have access to share my advice with your community. So thank you so much.
Love it. All right, bombshell. This is faux show a shareable episode. So you know what we do. Our community is not based on chit-chatting in a Facebook group. Not that that's wrong, but that's just not my audience. And so the way that we love on each other is we find other bombshells and we think, who needs this message? And I can't imagine there's a woman in your life that doesn't need to hear Shannen's wisdom. So share this episode. Make sure that you leave a rating and review wherever you listen to us so that other bombshells can easily find us. And that's how we support each other in becoming bold, brave, unwaveringly confident women and our bombshell boys in business. We will see you on the next episode.